The fact that one member of the European family could sink to the level of the concentration camp throws a dubious light on all the others. Who are we to imagine that it couldn't happen here? It has filled us with horror to realize all that man is capable of, and of which, therefore, we too are capable. Since then, a terrible doubt about humanity and about ourselves gnaws at our hearts. Deep down, we all know that none of us are as virtuous as we often perceive ourselves to be. We possess primal drives for sex and power, harboring a cruel and aggressive side that, when left unacknowledged, can wreak havoc. This darker aspect resides in what Jung aptly calls the shadow. A mature relationship with this dark part of our personality is not only a necessity for psychological development. In fact, the integrity of the whole world depends on the integration of the shadow. Today, we'll find out why. The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality, for no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort. To become conscious of it involves recognizing the dark aspects of the personality as present and real. This act is the essential condition for any kind of self-knowledge, and it therefore, as a rule, meets with considerable resistance. It is not what we willingly expose to the world, but rather what we deny that sinks into the unconscious and starts to congregate in the shadows of our personality. A hidden entity resides within, waiting to be acknowledged and understood. In After the Catastrophe, Jung's words echo hauntingly. In each of us, there's another whom we do not know. To cast a shadow, there must be an obstructing object. In the realm of psychology, this object is our persona. The persona, much like an actor's mask, represents the traits we showcase to the world, concealing our true nature. As Jung articulates, it is a kind of mask designed to make a definite impression upon others, while concealing the genuine individual beneath. The construction of our persona begins early in life, as we learn which elements of our character garner approval and which are rejected. Our persona is shaped by societal expectations, family approval, and peer acceptance. Over time, we identify with this mask, inadvertently hiding undesirable traits not only from others, but also from ourselves. These concealed traits, rejected and repressed, coalesce in the unconscious and form the shadow, a repository of denied elements. Although a necessary part of psychological development, this also poses a problem. Wherever unconsciousness reigns, there's bondage and possession. Every individual carries a shadow, and the less it integrates into conscious life, the denser and darker it becomes. Yet, this also makes the shadow a rich, untapped source of potential. If acknowledged, there's a chance for correction. As it remains in constant contact with other interests, it is subject to modifications. Integrating these dark sides of our personality makes us whole, and as a whole person, we are more capable and productive individuals. Confronting the shadow begins with acknowledging its existence. Our presented personality, our conscious sense of self, is but a fragment of our totality. Honest self-reflection and self-criticism unveil the traits we've hidden. As Jung asserts, both the good and the bad must come to light for us to live without self-deception. But this integration cannot take place and be put to a useful purpose unless one can admit the tendencies bound up with the shadow and allow them some measure of realization, tempered, of course, with the necessary criticism. This leads to disobedience and self-disgust, but also to self-reliance, without which individuation is unthinkable. This makes the shadow such a valuable source of potential, because it is usually the aggressive drives that are pushed into the shadow by society. And this is for a reason, because society relies on trade and cooperation, with which uncontrolled aggression would interfere. But at the same time, we need a good amount of controlled aggression to act freely and without fear. If we cannot say no, we undermine our self-reliance and lose the ability to act ethically. Because ethical behavior requires a choice, and usually one course of action is saying no to something. Integrating the shadow is thereby a precondition for individuality and moral agency. The ability to will otherwise must, unfortunately, be real if ethics are to make any sense at all. Anyone who submits to the law from the start, or to what is generally accepted, acts like the man in the parable who buried his talent in the earth. But there's even more to be gained from integrating the shadow than moral agency or individuality. The repressed contents of the shadow do not remain dormant. They operate autonomously, influencing our perceptions and behaviors. The shadow manifests itself through projection, where we see in others the very faults we deny in ourselves. Often, these projections lead to destructive behavior and cause harm. For example, perpetrators who don't want to assume responsibility for their actions might engage in victim blaming. Instead of recognizing the darker parts of their own personality, they project them onto the victim and make them responsible for their own actions. These dynamics find expression in a great plethora of destructive behavior and can fuel conflicts and war. Since we tend to attribute to others the evils we refuse to recognize within ourselves, we are creating a world full of scapegoats. If we want to make the world a better place, we have to withdraw these projections and recognize them for what they are, rejected parts of our own personality. If you imagine someone who is brave enough to withdraw all projections, then you get an individual who is conscious of a pretty thick shadow. Such a man has settled himself with new problems and conflicts. He has become a serious problem to himself, as he is now unable to say that they do this or that, they are wrong and they must be fought against. He lives in the house of the gathering. Such a man knows that whatever is wrong in the world is in himself, and if he only learns to deal with his own shadow, he has done something real for the world. He has succeeded in shouldering at least an infinitesimal part of the gigantic, unsolved social problems of our day. These problems are mostly so difficult because they are poisoned by mutual projections. How can anyone see straight when he does not even see himself and the darkness he unconsciously carries with him into all his dealings? Projections are chains that bind us, leading to a state of possession where our perceptions are distorted. They isolate us from reality by replacing genuine connections with illusory ones. The unconscious, like a projector, casts its images onto the screen of perception, clouding our understanding of the world and ourselves. As we know, it is not the conscious subject, but the unconscious which does the projecting. Hence one meets with projections, one does not make them. The effect of projections is to isolate the subject from his environment, since instead of a real relation to it, there is now only an illusory one. Projections change the world into the replica of one's own unknown face. This phenomenon transcends the individual level. Our collective understanding is often distorted by projections too. Newspapers, books, rumors, and social discourse reflect our tendency to project onto others, assuming knowledge of their thoughts and character. Convictions about others often mirror the unacknowledged aspects of ourselves. If these projections get out of control on a collective scale, we find ourselves in dark places. One such place was Nazi Germany. 80 million people crowded into the circus to witness its own destruction at the hands of a narcissist. In the harrowing aftermath of the catastrophic events in the 20th century, Jung's words resonate with a chilling truth. The spectacle of destruction, orchestrated by a narcissistic force, unfolds as a collective tragedy. A circus where the audience is both participant and witness to its own undoing. Desperation to escape one's own shadow leads to a dissociation, a state where internal contradictions and darkness are projected onto others. Or, as Jung states, this condition can easily lead to a hysterical dissociation of the personality, which consists essentially in one hand not knowing what the other is doing, in wanting to jump over one's own shadow, in looking for everything dark, inferior and culpable in others. The aftermath breeds self-deception as a coping mechanism. Inventing plausible reasons and embracing falsehoods becomes a collective response, a symptom of a society in the grip of hysteria. Jung identifies this as an inferior state, a weakness that blinds a nation to its own faults. In an individual, we call this sort of thing a hysterical twilight state. When a whole nation finds itself in this condition, it will follow a mediumistic Führer over the housetops with a sleepwalker's assurance, only to land in the street with a broken back. The Nazis offered society an outlet for their collective shadow, and Germany took this opportunity of projection gratefully. With a clear scapegoat in view, a whole nation could rid itself from its collective shadow by projecting it upon the enemy. But this catastrophe cannot be left behind as an historical error now overcome. The underlying psychodynamics remain. We still attribute to the other fellow all the evil and inferior qualities that we do not like to recognize in ourselves, and therefore have to criticize and attack him. when all that has happened is that an inferior soul has emigrated from one person to another. The world is still full of scapegoats, just as it formerly teemed with witches and werewolves. How am I to live with this shadow? What attitude is required if I am to be able to live in spite of evil? In order to find valid answers to these questions, a complete spiritual renewal is needed. And this cannot be given gratis. Each man must strive to achieve it for himself. Jung's words echo a call for introspection and personal responsibility. As we grapple with the shadow that haunts our collective history, the conclusion draws us into the realm of individual transformation and spiritual renewal. This is not the fate of Germany alone, but of all Europe. We must all open our eyes to the shadow who looms behind contemporary man. We have no need to hold up the devil's mask before the Germans. The fact speaks a plainer language, and anyone who does not understand it is simply beyond help. The path forward is individual, a personal journey of self-discovery and reflection. Confronting the shadow requires a nuanced and introspective approach, acknowledging that the solution to the complexities of our collective psyche are not easily prescribed. Jung invokes the transformative power of inner change, contrasting with the superficiality of political and social reforms. True change must emanate from a place of inner harmony and self-awareness. This is a truth which we are forever forgetting, because our eyes are fascinated by the conditions around us and riveted on them, instead of examining our own heart and conscience. Each individual must embark on this personal odyssey. The German experience serves as a potent reminder of the vulnerability and helplessness that can arise when a nation falls prey to its own shadows. In navigating the intricate terrain of the darkness within, we confront moral challenges, acknowledge hidden entities, and grapple with the duality of human nature. The integration of the shadow emerges as a personal responsibility that ripples into societal realms. As we confront our shadow, we illuminate not only the recesses of our own being, but also contribute to shouldering the burdens of a world ensnared in the complexities of collective projections which shape the course of our shared human destiny. No old formulas which once had a value can be brought into force again. The eternal truths cannot be transmitted mechanically. In every epoch, they must be born anew from the human psyche.